This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
One more month. One more month in this godforsaken apartment complex. With razor-sharp walls as thin as a sheet of paper. You can hear the neighbors whispering to each other through the walls. I'm so done with Pittsburgh, dude. The only reason I still can't leave for good is that I still have family here. Got to make periodic visits. But my God, dude. I mean, on the one hand, it's going to be one less Trump voter in the city. It's probably not a good thing. Not that anybody could save the state of our godforsaken economy. Republican, Democrat. I'm just ready to move, focus on my new line of work, start from scratch, and see what fate God has in store for me. Maybe being an avid churchgoer would benefit me. Or maybe not. I know what does benefit me is talking about the thing people came to hear about. Professional wrestling. The building block of this channel. And that's what we're going to discuss in a moment. Make sure you all subscribe, comment, like the show for me if you have not already. We are on YouTube and Rumble Mondays and Fridays. I know I'll probably just reiterate all these talking points at the end of the show like I do all the time. But it doesn't hurt to get it out of the way first. This actually might be a shorter show than normal. Because looking at my notes for all these classic views, or these classic shows, there really wasn't a whole lot going on. Especially with this Crockett episode. I remember last week when I was like, yeah, this upcoming Crockett episode's only 38 minutes in runtime. Probably not even worth reviewing it. Because it doesn't look like a whole lot was going on. Well, looking back, I was mostly proven right. I think after last week's exploit, what may have been the most bizarre episode of Crockett TV we've ever reviewed, I was at least keeping my fingers crossed that we'd get some actual star power on the show this week. If I saw Dawn Valentine get a featured singles match again, I'd have boycotted the remainder of these episodes. It's always a bad sign when the cold open features Al Perez. Thankfully, they didn't show the entire match he had with Brad Armstrong. Instead, we saw Brad trying to, I was going to say yank Gary Hart into the ring by his collar. Based on the footage, I think it would be more accurate to say Brad gave Gary Hart a giant man hug before he got cut off by Perez. And then Kevin Sullivan was in the frame for all of 2 seconds before they cut away. And, yeah. I mean, I figured at some point in the review I'd probably take the opportunity to talk about Kevin Sullivan, because I'm pretty sure everybody by now has heard the news. Now, what the hell, I may as well touch on it now. Yes, a little late to the party on this one, but Kevin Sullivan did pass away last week at the age of 75, I believe. You know, he had already been undergoing a series of health complications dating all the way back to surgery from, was it April or May of this year? There was a period over the summer where we heard stories that he was recovering well. He was mostly still bedbound, but things appeared to be better. And then as of a week ago, we found out that he had passed away in Concord, Massachusetts. And obviously we're covering a lot of Sullivan's work here in 88. He's been one of the centerpieces of the program throughout most of the year with the Varsity Club. I know that I personally have been highly critical of a lot of his stuff involving Precious and the Garvins. You know, Kevin Sullivan has always been one of those controversial figures for me in the wrestling business. Obviously, I won't deny the tremendous work he did in places like Florida. You know, even before that, when he wrestled in Georgia in the early 80s. A lot of the first footage I had seen of Sullivan was probably the work he did in Memphis, the feud with Lawler. I mean, if you're trying to look for his best work, though, I mean, you'd have to go to look at his Florida run when he was doing the whole Prince of Darkness gimmick, the deranged cult leader who assembled a mass group of heels like Mark Lewin and Bob Roop and a handful of others I'm not remembering. I think Luna Vachon was part of the faction at one point. In the eyes of a modern fan, it might not translate the same way like it did back in 81 or 82. You know, suspension of disbelief is hard to maintain when you go back and look at a lot of that material. The problem is that when Vince and the WWF went overboard with all the magical woo-woo superpower bullshit, like Kane and Taker shooting lightning out of their assholes, or sacrificing people on giant satanic crosses, you know, it's hard not to see that as a smart fan today and scoff at a lot of the stuff Sullivan was doing in Florida, even though it wasn't to that extreme. The reason I think it worked for the time was that even though the promos were mostly incomprehensible and the personalities were over the top and outlandish, they never presented the Prince of Darkness gimmick in a hokey, cartoonish way. You know, they try to get you to think, these people are out of their mind. Sullivan's a real crazy loon bat that ought to be locked in an insane asylum. But you never saw them doing dumb, goofy attitude era bullshit. You know what I mean? So again, even if I didn't really see a lot of that stuff growing up, that was a gimmick that worked extremely well for its time. Because you could actually believe that Kevin Sullivan was unhinged and crazy. And his personality kind of trickled over into all the territories he worked. No matter where he landed, he was Kevin Sullivan. You actually believed he was a devilish cult leader. Or whatever the actual term is. An occultist, I guess. And yeah, you know, he was involved in a lot of dumb shit later on in his career. You know, I love the Varsity Club stuff he's doing around this period, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of the summer program in 88 with him and the Garvin brothers. I mostly blame Precious's bad acting for that. But the Dungeon of Doom stuff, that was awful. When they brought him back in 91 to manage Oz, that shit sucked. And like they tried to replicate a lot of that Prince of Darkness stuff in the early 90s, and it just never really worked. Kind of tying it with the post-DOD material. It's always hard for me to go back and watch a lot of those Nitro tapes with him, Benoit, and Nancy. All the bad blood and the behind-the-scenes drama with everything going on there. You know, like I said, I guess it's hard for me to value Sullivan's in-ring career the same way it does for a lot of the older school personalities in the business. For the people that actually got to work with him closely and get to know him on a personal level. I can only really vouch for what I saw of him on camera. I do know that he had a very storied career. I know he was a role model and helped out a lot of guys that are currently involved in the business today. I know he helped to train and work closely with a lot of them. You know, it is kind of crazy when you think Kevin Sullivan was working indie dates as far back as like 2020. You think about the road schedule, the amount of damage that he did to his body over the years, all that wear and tear. The idea that Kevin Sullivan was still working indie dates as far as like 4 or 5 years ago and still looking relatively healthy doing it. How many guys can you say accomplished that? Not too many. I mean, it's a tragic, heartbreaking story. You know, especially when we're hearing that he was recovering well and seemed to be coming out of a slump as of 2 or 3 months ago. And all of a sudden, the news breaks a week ago that he unexpectedly passes away. You know, it's not going to hinder my enjoyment of reviewing his segments on TV for the time being. But, you know, we always kind of talk about weird timing. And, you know, we're in the heart of reviewing all of his hot runs here in 88 and Crockett. And it's like, now he's gone. So unfortunate, man. A lot of these all-time greats are just slipping through our fingers. You know, we're just kind of reaching that point now where the names are slowly fading away. And it's only a matter of time before a whole new crop of older generational talent is just gone. It's so sad. So getting back to the show here, what limited amount of material there is to actually talk about this week. At least the stars were back. In some capacity. I can confidently say the show had more than 15% star power. There were no Chris Champion Dawn Valentine squashes this week. No, we open up with Salt to the Earth, Jim Cornette, and the Midnight Express coming out for a promo. Actually, that's MJF's gimmick. Same principle. And again, the big feud they're pushing here is the Midnight's Horsemen heel versus heel feud. The money program that could have been. Corny's out there throwing shade at the Horsemen, making fun of their Horseman vitamins for being chewy Fred Flintstone knockoffs. He also took a major blow at Tully's physique, saying that when he finally kicks the bucket, they'll be selling his body for science. As if Tully needed to look for any more excuses to bail out of the company. Tully had some real heat with everybody by this point in 1988. And, you know, Cornette's kind of billing the Horseman Midnight's feud as irresistible force versus immovable object. Still not really sure if Tully and Arn are immovable. But the Midnights are, without a doubt, irresistible. Well, at least Stan is. And that led us to Ricky Morton versus Lee Ramsey. The long-lost cousin of Gordon Ramsay, apparently. He sure had the body of somebody who looked like he would have enjoyed Gordon Ramsay's food. He looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy out there. Whole body was just rows of tits. Vile. So, yeah, Ricky flying solo for this one. I had to presume that Robert Gibson had already left the company again by this point. Even though the Rock and Roll Express were literally back here in June. And now we're back to having only one member of the group still under contract. For how much longer, I have no idea. Because I know Ricky's pretty much done with the company by the end of the year. And if you are looking for the perfect Ricky Morton wrestling at 50% effort match, boy, do I have the example for you. This was Ricky Morton on total autopilot mode. It is the most bored I've ever seen Ricky looking on camera. They did some stuff for a while, and then Ricky came off the top with a crossbody dive and won. At which point he did an interview with the booth, basically all but saying, "My longtime partner Robert decided this place is a sinking ship, so he's gone, and I have now found a replacement partner. Nikita Koloff. Why not?" God, Ricky was totally blown up here. To the point where Nikita had to step in and take over. And he sounded more coherent than Ricky did. Think about that. Nikita described their team as, and I quote, "a different kind of rock and roll express." Indeed. And that brings us to the advertised six-man they promoted at the top of the show. It is all members of the Varsity Club going up against Gary Phelps, Rick Allen, and Don Valentine. It's fucking Don Valentine. He's back. You have no idea how furious I was when I saw the graphic come up for this match. I'm like, these cocksucking motherfuckers. The audacity. Making me sit through another Don Valentine squash after last week's abortion. The only reason I did not shut the show off right there was that I was giddy at the idea of seeing what the hell the Varsity Club was going to do to this asshat. I was so disappointed when he tagged out early on. I was grinning from ear to ear watching Sullivan beat on this idiot for the first 2 minutes. And then Rick let him tag out. I was like, Rick, no! This is your chance to end this guy forever. And they spent more time beating up Gary Phelps in this match than they did Don Valentine. It was torture. Watching poor Phelps take the bulk of the ass beating while Valentine got to stand on the apron and watch. Thankfully, the ending made up for it. Because they got Donnie back in there. Sullivan gave him like 5 foot stomps to the gut. And then Rick actually, I believe, killed him by spiking him on his head with a belly-to-belly. If he didn't outright kill Don Valentine, he may as well have broken his neck. I know I'm spending more time harping on Don Valentine than anything. Okay, seriously though. How did they ever allow this guy to get in a ring? Even as a way to rib the guy, I don't think I ever would have permitted him to get in the ring to work. I mean, he was more of a danger to himself than he was his opponents. It's like everything I said last week. He could not bump. He could not sell. He could not do jack shit. All he could do was pray to God he didn't die after getting thrown around by these guys. Because they weren't going easy on him. Someone needs to write a book on the list of all-time horrible jobbers. And you can just print Don Valentine's name on the front cover. It'll sell millions of copies, I promise. So then we came back for a Lex Luger promo, where he informed us that he is, quote, all-time high. I've heard of people being high, but all-time high must have been some strong weed, brother. It was every copy and paste Luger promo you've ever heard. I'm coming for Ric Flair. I'm coming for the 20 pounds of gold. removes t-shirt, angrily stares into the camera, flexes, promises that nothing is going to stop him from proclaiming his destiny, except the booking committee. By the way, I can't tell if this is something they actually do on purpose or if they're just really bad at crowd shots. Every single time Luger takes off his shirt, you can hear the girls screaming in the studio, yet every time they do a close-up on one of the females, they all either look bored or completely disinterested. They get a shot of two girls who had this expression on their face. I can't even describe it. It was like, ugh, this conceited asshole, revealing his massive oily body. Gross. And this is not the first time we've seen that either. We see Luger take off his shirt during every goddamn studio promo. There has not been one single time where they got a crowd shot of a girl who did not look totally disengaged. And it'd be one thing if Luger was still a heel. He is a babyface. This is not helping his credibility. Speaking of not helping somebody's credibility, letting Brad Armstrong wrestle a boring squash for 5 minutes. Bad idea. He wrestled Dave Spearman. They did boring chain holds. Spearman missed a wacky diving elbow. And then Armstrong hit his Russian leg sweep for the 3. And then we had a remarkable interview segment with Paul Jones. This is how David Crockett began his line of questioning. Paul, things haven't been going too well for you. Thanks, David. Why don't you kick the fucking guy in his groin while you're standing there? So I had no clue what the hell Paul said for half this promo. I was too busy getting distracted by watching the Angel of Death make goofy facial expressions through his mask. And yes, I could tell, merely because they zoomed in on him and made it completely obvious. Something about how Paul still hasn't eliminated the Road Warriors. He at one point said he's not looking for victories, he's looking for victims. So apparently wins and losses do not matter to the Paul Jones army. He said only one thing matters at this point, and that's Paul. And then they both left. Did I mention how the show had virtually nothing going on? Case in point, a generic, nonsensical Paul Jones promo, followed by a very boring, generic Al Perez squash with Max MacGyver. It went 30 seconds and Perez won with a spinning toe hold. Then we heard Gary Hart do a promo afterwards, basically making fun of Dusty's ugly sister. He said that Dickie Murdoch was seen dancing with her. And if you can imagine Dusty dressed in drag, that is what his sister looked like. He actually hinted at the idea that she may have been a transvestite. But I'm not exactly sure if that was politically correct to say on television, so Gary simply alluded to it. I mean, that's all I got out of the promo. And then we had Barry Windham and Kurt Thompson. This was one of those in-the-background matches where two guys are in the ring wrestling, but the main focus is on the inset promo where Tully and Arn are talking about the Midnights. It was very WWF-like. Double A getting really spicy with the Heat promo, though. First, he made fun of Bobby Eaton's scraggly blonde hair, saying that Arn and Tully used to hook up with broads like that in Charlotte. but then they disposed of them like hooker trash. I was going to make a Charlotte Flair joke, but I decided against it. And then Arn said that Stan focuses too much on fucking girls. He takes his eye off the ball when it comes to wrestling matches, and that is why he will never be a World Tag Team Champion. Harsh. So Barry won with a claw hold. I spent most of the match trying to figure out what the hell that white powder was on the back of his tights. At first, I thought it was a shitty design. No, I'm pretty sure that was some kind of powder. Or detergent residue. Looked like a laundry mishap. And so then Barry and JJ did a promo on Sting. Yeah, it was on Sting. Barry promised that when he gets the claw hold on Sting, he will pin his shoulders down just like he's done to everybody else. That's pretty much all there was to it. At least they reminded me who Barry was feuding with. Because I had almost totally forgotten about Barry on this show since the match with Dusty in Baltimore. He started talking about Sting, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess those guys are still feuding for the belt. Glad to know. And then we came back for a Full Horseman family reunion. They were all at the podium. One big happy family. The perfect sponsor for Hamburger Helper. And, no, naturally, they're the most over talent on the entire show. Crowd's going apeshit for them while Flair's cutting what is supposed to be a heel promo. He says that Luger was correct when he asserted that the Horsemen are on top of their game. Which is true since they have all the gold. Discount the U.S. tag straps, but nobody cares about those belts. He says the Horsemen don't care about what anybody thinks or what they want, because they call the shots as long as they're on top. And as long as they're still together as a unit, they will continue to be the best in this sport. And if you don't believe them, look them up. Can't really argue anything Flair said here. Despite the fact that he's a heel, he's not wrong. This was the epitome of, boys, go out there and kill some airtime for 3 minutes. Put yourselves over and talk about how great you guys are. Guarantee that's what Dusty told him. And that left just enough airtime to close out with the Fantastics versus Brad and Britt Holiday. Not Brett Holiday. Britt Holiday. Apparently, Brett was beaten up so badly the other week, he had to undergo a sex change to hide the humiliation. Think about that for a second, too. Brett Holiday was misspelled as Britt Holiday. But it wasn't one letter. It was two. Britt was spelled B-R-I-T-T. Like Britt Baker. The female version. They misspelled Brett Holiday as Britt Holiday. No, I refuse to buy the idea that wasn't intentional. No way. So now the Holiday brothers are being paired together. As if it wasn't already difficult to distinguish one from the other. Now you put them together in the same segment, making it impossible to tell the other apart. I believe the fatter one was Brett. Don't quote me. In any case, it went about 90 seconds and the Fantastics won with a double-assisted press splash combo. And it was so unremarkable. The minute the Fantastics won, the last thing we hear on the show is Tony Schiavone saying, and I quote, "All right." With about that level of enthusiasm. And then they went to the end credits. That was apparently NWA's buffer program for the month. Remember last week when the announcers were saying that August would have the best action we would see all year? So far, I think August has been the worst month of wrestling action we've seen all year. We are 2 weeks in. The most notable match we have seen on television is a Chris Champion Dawn Valentine squash match. A match that defied all sense of hope in the business. Still waiting for that packed action we were promised, guys. I know we got a few more weeks here, but the competition is not high. Just book something that stands out more than Dawn Valentine. I think you can manage something. Part of me actually would have loved to see Dawn Valentine try to work with some of these Midsouth guys from '83. God, can you imagine what guys like Duggan or JYD would have done to that idiot? Hacksaw Butch Reed? I shudder to think. Blood would have been spilled. I think Watts would have personally picked the guy up over his shoulders, carried him out to the side door, and threw his ass out into the parking lot. Not to try and make the rest of this podcast a hit piece on Dawn Valentine. Although I very easily could. So, Mid-South Television was kind of interesting this week. We covered a couple major title changes the other week. We know that Magnum TA and Hacksaw Duggan are the new Mid-South Tag Champions. We only really heard in passing that Hacksaw Reed had won the North American Heavyweight title, which he had won from the Dog from the Superdome. So this week, we got to hear him talk about it for the first time actually holding the championship. And he had quite a bit to vent about here. After proclaiming that he's run through all the top names in the territory to finally gain possession of the North American title, he reminds us of the previous bout he had in New Orleans with Duggan, where Reed had to show Duggan why there can only be one true hacksaw in town. So they went to the footage where Reed was doing the dubbed-over commentary. And it is important to mention that this footage goes a while back. So the ring psychology was actually flipped here. Hacksaw Duggan was still a heel, and Reed was still a beloved babyface. I mean, he had just shown up in the territory not too long before this. And he and Watts mentioned that at the top of the clip. I believe the date was March 21st. And Reed's commentary was great. He was breaking out all the classic old-school Southern cliches. The amount of times I heard him break out the phrase, soup bones, in this thing. It was wild. But he and Watts are sort of explaining the story that conditioning was more on Reed's side here. Duggan looked physically exhausted the longer the match went. And you get the big climax at the end where Duggan misses a spear in the corner. Which is funny because Reed couldn't remember what the name of the move was. So he's stuttering over himself trying to think of what it is. Finally, Watts just blurts out, "Spear!" And then Reed press slams Duggan. Comes off the ropes with a big shoulder tackle of his own. 1, 2, 3. And again, Reed was still over as a babyface by this period, so the crowd's all showering him with admiration. But right before they cut to break, Watts made sure to point out, well, the tides have shifted here between you and Duggan. Now Duggan is the fan favorite. And now he's wondering how that might work against Hacksaw Reed. well, with having the crowd momentum in the other direction for a change. But Reed's basically like, well, I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here to win by any means necessary. You don't have to like it. You don't have to hate it. You just need to accept it. It was good stuff. I liked how they made sure to touch on the fact that because it's old footage, it predates Hacksaw Duggan splitting from the Rat Pack and Hacksaw Reed turning heel on Dog on television. So without the context, you see old tape like that from March and you're immediately confused. Like, hold on a sec. I thought Reed was supposed to be a heel. Why is he working as the babyface in this match? Well, the answer, it was taped 5 months ago. Staying on the subject of Reed, now we're ready to see the tape from July 16th. His match with JYD for the North American title. Also important to note, it is a 2 out of 3 falls match at the request of Hacksaw Reed. And the reason he wanted to show the film again is that last week, the fans heard the corporate spin on the story of what happened in that match. So Reed wants to set the record straight and give his side of what happened. Just to make sure there are not any unforeseen biases. And what a great highlight reel this was. It is amazing how much they packed into this thing. Just a total masterpiece in the art of storytelling. And that's why the 2 out of 3 fall stipulation works so well. Because it allowed for them to take you through the roller coaster ride of peaks and valleys throughout this match. The whole premise here is that JYD is seeing red from the beginning. He doesn't give a shit about stipulations or roles or anything. He's pissed off that Reed turned on him and left him a mangled mess on Midsouth television. So all he's motivated to do is beat this guy to a bloody pulp. And of course, that's a story Watts and Reed are explaining here as we see the action unfold. And even Watts at one point points out, he's had multiple opportunities to put you away and go up 1 fall to 0. But he won't capitalize. Instead, he wound up disqualifying himself, the Dog did, by running Hacksaw into the ring post. So all of a sudden, Dog is down in the first fall. Of course, Reed comes up a minute later gushing blood. Although it's borderline impossible to see it with the darkened backdrop in the arena. But this all leads to the controversy in the second fall, because right before they're about to ring the bell to start fall 2, Buzz Sawyer comes down, and he starts wrapping a bunch of gauze tape around Reed's head to cover up the open wound. And immediately Watts is calling bullshit. He's like, he has no business being out there, Hacksaw. You're telling me this wasn't all part of your master plan? Reed's obviously denying it. He's trying to be a good Samaritan, Bill Watts. How do you not see that? So what happens is the Dog ends up decking Sawyer with a right hand on the ring apron. He also punches Reed, who takes a big bump out to the floor under the timekeeper's table. And from there we see Sawyer hit the ring and start going after Dog. So that is another automatic disqualification. And this time it is a technicality on Reed, since Sawyer was in his corner. But again, it all played into Reed's game plan. Because then we get Sawyer and Dog going at it in between the falls. Somehow Alfred Neely got bumped right before Hacksaw Reed slid back into the ring. And meanwhile, here comes King Kong Bundy as he levels Dog in the back of the head with a gimmick cast. Of course, Dog has to over-dramatically sell it like a cinematic movie. But the reason Hacksaw didn't get DQ'd here is that the ref didn't see it. Plus, we were technically in between falls still. So all Reed has to do is crawl over and cover Dog's dead body once Neely rang the bell from the floor. By that point, the damage was already done. And there you have it. Hacksaw Reed wins 2 falls to 1. He is the new North American champion. After some chicanery, to put it mildly. But it was so well done, dude. Grainy footage and all. Awesome highlight reel. You know, they elevated the weight of this feud in more ways than you can imagine. Really trying to push the idea that Reed is a despicable, loathsome bad guy. That he doesn't give a fuck about what the fans think anymore. He's done trying to win by the rules. A win is a win is a win in his playbook, damn it. And as long as Reed has possession of the North American title, there is nobody that can claim they're better than him, including the Dog. So from there, we come back for more Superdome highlight footage. This segment ruled. Okay, so this time, we have Kamala making his return to Midsouth by going up against Wildfire Tommy Rich. And of course, that would be fine in and of itself. But it would not be complete if we did not get General Skandar Akbar's commentary to go along with the great film footage. The icing on the cake in this segment. Immediately, Akbar calling bullshit on Johnny Rich accompanying Tommy to ringside. Look at that snot-nosed kid. Coming out without a manager license. What kind of bullshit is this? It's like fucking phenomenal too, because it's all highlighted footage. But I think Akbar is also trying to call it as a shoot, giving off the impression that he's not actually seen the footage back yet. So he's putting over Kamala at the beginning. Look at this beast. Kamala knows not when to give in. He dines on raw flesh and smells blood in the water. And like 2 seconds go by, Kamala misses a clothesline and takes a massive bump out to the floor, to which Akbar calmly goes, a rare misstep by the Ugandan warrior there. I love it when the heels get humbled. Of course, Akbar's giving Tommy Rich shit the whole time, saying he was coddled as a top guy in Atlanta for years. But now he's facing real competition. He's not wrestling in the minor leagues anymore, brother. He's facing the top of the food chain. The other highlight in this match, it's a spot where Akbar trips up Tommy Rich in the ropes. General Akbar does not even draw attention to it. They put the camera on him to show him running around getting chased by Johnny at ringside. Akbar just goes, always great to get a shot of the General. Meanwhile, Johnny Rich has no reason to chase me around ringside. Totally uncalled for. This man is a fucking legend. A legend, I say. Fuck you if you disagree. One of the most underrated managers of all time. And right as Kamala has Rich on the brink of defeat, Akbar's tearing him down, saying Tommy Rich has no hope of defeating the massive Ugandan warrior. And right when you think Kamala's about to put him away, here comes that no-good hippie. And who would Akbar be referring to in this situation? Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I cannot tell you how hard I laughed when Duggan hit the ring. And the first thing I hear come out of Akbar's mouth is, that no-good hippie. I believe he also referenced his red bell pepper nose, which was also quite comical. Hippie. In 1983, General Skandar Akbar making fun of shaggy, long-haired baby faces, calling them hippies. This segment was... I cannot lie. It was one of my favorite Mid-South segments we've covered yet. All thanks to Skandar Akbar's commentary. He was on fire in this segment, dude. This was one of the best pieces of business I'd ever seen from him. I actually went back and rewatched it after I saw the show, just because I was that entertained. All for an underneath match on the Superdome card that nobody ever remembers. I didn't give a shit. I just wanted to listen to General Akbar be a dick to Tommy Rich and call Hacksaw Duggan a hippie again. Oh, and by the way, just to put closure to the segment, Akbar closed out his commentary by issuing a challenge to Hacksaw Duggan. If he can beat Hacksaw Butch Reed in a non-title bout, he will get 5 minutes in the ring with Akbar. And since we know Reed already has a victory over Duggan, though that shouldn't be an issue. Right. Moving on with more of the Superdome highlight reel. Mr. Wrestling 2 took on Wild Bill Irwin. God, more pot shots at the folks wrestling in Atlanta during this time. I didn't know there was so much heat on Ole Anderson. Everybody's taking shots at the competition outside the Midsouth area. 2 saying Irwin locked horns with a couple ham and eggers over in Atlanta, but he's never had to get physical with the Mid-South competition. This is where the big boys play. Where have I heard that before? Real competition here in Mid-South. Not those pesky North and Southeasterners. I mean, there really wasn't a whole lot to say about the action, other than Wrestling 2 bumbling over himself a handful of times, forgetting how the English language worked. He went over with a running knee lift. Again, the whole show is basically letting the top guys share their feedback on all the Superdome tapes. You know, talk about the importance of their matches and give them a chance to put over the company. It was going to be impossible for 2 to top that commentary from General Akbar in the previous segment. God bless the guy, he tried. But, well, Mr. Wrestling 2 was not how you say a wordsmith. Nor was he the personality that Akbar was. So finally we get some ring action at the Irish McNeil Boys Club. With approximately 10 minutes left of airtime, we get King Kong Bundy and Boris Zerkov versus Tim Horner and Bill Ratke's Enormous Gut. It was literally everything I wrote down in my bullet points. Short, sloppy, uneventful. Bundy barely got Ratke up for the Avalanche Slam. Which should tell you something right there. The 400-pound King Kong Bundy struggled to pick up Bill Ratke for what was essentially a running power slam. Christ. And it was probably still more noteworthy than the Missing Link versus Ken Johnson, which was also sloppy, short, and uneventful. See my notes about Missing Link's debut the other week. I gave you my full backstory on the Missing Link. Was not a fan. The Link went over with a camel clutch. And then for our final standby of the week, Larry Hare and Bill Rose, the Fat Hairy Jobbers. They were back in action. They wrestled Dr. Death and Johnny Rich. This was one of those TV main events where it started off relatively fine and then totally fell apart at the end. I don't know if they got spoofed by the time constraints or what the hell happened, but by the end, I mean, all four of these guys were totally on separate pages. Dr. Death is in there running wild. Again, he's not fluid with his ring work by this point, so, his shit doesn't look all that great to begin with. And then it leads to Hare and Rose bumbling around the ring like two pinballs. They had no idea what they were supposed to be doing. Everybody's out of position for just about everything, to the point where even Bill Watts is calling everybody out. And then you get the spot where Dr. Death tries to set up the one guy for a spear, while Johnny Rich cuts the other off with a drop kick. Somehow the jobbers comically timed this in such a way where one guy fell on top of the other's face with his boot. So that had to have sucked. And then Steve managed to get the pin with like 10 seconds left of airtime. But hey, they got their shit in. And that's all that matters. So if you already can't tell, I would say you could basically turn the show off after the Kamala Tommy Rich highlight film. This was one of those programs where after the first 20 minutes, it very quickly fell off a cliff. Those Irish McNeil fans got anally probed with the ring action this week. 3 really piss-poor matches in a row, brother. Not good. I mean, at least we got the Hacksaw Reed JYD footage, plus General Akbar's brilliant commentary. But yeah, from that Wrestling 2 segment onward, I mean, you could pretty much skip over all that. So meanwhile, over in Texas, there's a little program called World Class Championship Wrestling. Perhaps you've all heard of it. Yeah, it is a product that just kind of exists. It is a wrestling show. I'm really trying, people. I got nothing. Last week I had one of those come to Jesus moments where, I'm watching the show. Halfway in, I'm realizing that I'm barely taking notes on half the segments. Then I actually sat down and talked about the show in depth. There really wasn't a whole lot going on. At the most, you can say Gary Hart's heel faction is at the forefront of the programming. But the Midnights are pretty much gone by this point. I think the Fantastics wrapped up around the same time. You still got Gino and Chris Adams there. The Von Erichs are around. But I keep coming back and hammering this talking point over and over again, but the booking, it's just so milquetoast. And I know I say it pretty often, but we've kind of reached the point in our world-class reviews where the glory period's over. Things are just kind of coasting by week. There's still a handful of things to talk about, but it's certainly not the same kind of energy we had in 82, 83, even certain parts of 84. Take the opener this week. Jack Victory versus Mike Reed. I wrote this in big, bold font. Who could possibly care? Who could care? No offense to Jack Victory or Mike Reed. But seriously, it's a boring match. Bill Mercer spent the whole time talking about some random tournament for whatever belt he was referencing. The Mid-East heavyweight title. Did I hear that right? Certainly he couldn't have been talking about the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight title, right? When in the hell did they ever call that belt the Mid-East Heavyweight title? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's almost as dumb as the Alabama Junior Heavyweight Championship. Sorry, Mike Jackson. Whatever he was referencing, it was far more appealing to him than whatever was happening in the match. Victory 1 was something. I didn't even write it down. Again, nobody cared. And then we came back for re-aired footage of a Kevin and Kerry versus Gino and Chris tag match from whenever this aired at the Sportatorium. I think it was early July. Don't quote me. Would have probably benefited from them putting up some kind of date graphic. Maybe that's just me nitpicking. I don't know. It was a Tornado Rules match, which you think I would have remembered offhand. The big issue, I think, is that, we've seen so many combinations of these Von Erich versus Gino Hernandez, Chris Adams matches. I mean, I can't tell one from the other by this point. They're always good. They're always fun to watch, but again, how many times have we seen this? It's a decent little brawl. Crowd was super into it. By the end of it, Chris looked like he had just gotten out of the shower. He was very moist. I mean, it's hard to review a match like this just because it's just one nonstop street fight for 12 minutes. The action's back and forth. The big angle was the spike pile driver the heels gave to Kevin on the floor, basically making Kerry fend for himself while Kevin sold for a while. And of course, they tried to escort Kevin to the back. But Kevin, with that never say die attitude, leave no man behind, Kevin valiantly says, as he runs back to the ring to help his brother. And then the finish is the heels bailing and saying, nope, fuck this, we're out. Well, that was quite anticlimactic. Kerry and Kevin win via forfeit because the heels decided, nah, we brawl for long enough. We're going to take a powder now. I believe Mercer's claim was that the Von Erichs won via disqualification. I'm not really sure how you get disqualified for walking out of a match with no rules. Then again, I don't understand a lot about world-class booking and or ring psychology. And I've been reviewing this product for 3 years. I mean, looking back, it was probably the highlight of the entire show. It was light years better than that fucking main event I'm about to review in just a minute. Before we do that, let's talk about Sean Cody versus Chris Adams. Before I say anything about the match, Sean Cody, God bless the guy. I'm sure he was a nice young man. But he had one of those faces that only a mother could love. The worst fucking haircut of all time. He had face acne in places I didn't even know human beings could grow acne. He had a decent body. That's all I can give him. By the way, for your sake, I'll save you the trouble. Do not Google search Sean Cody if you are looking for a wrestling Wikipedia. You will get a Wikipedia page for a completely different Sean Cody. One that may or may not have dabbled in the world of gay pornography. I'm just throwing it out there. Learn and live. So, I mean, Sean got a bit of offense on Chris here, but Chris by and large dominated. Killed him with the super kick at the end. Right on the beam. And then we had the post-match angle, which was interesting, I suppose. For reasons that I cannot explain, other than the fact that Chris and Gino are heels, therefore they're assholes, they tied up David Manning in the ropes and then proceeded to cut his hair, to which Bill Mercer calmly reacted to by simply saying, well, that's definitely going to be a fine for Gino and Chris. A fine, you say? Well, I have certainly guessed suspension and or termination of contract. But I guess a good old slap on the wrist fine will make up for the action. Why did they cut David's hair? I have no idea. They apparently decided that Sean Cody was too much of a geek to get heat on. So they figured beating up David, the official, well, that would definitely get them over his heels. And they were probably right. Because for whatever reason, 80% of this crowd was very much behind Chris Adams at the end of this match. There were multiple women in the crowd that just loved seeing this guy have his way with his dweeb Sean Cody. So it's probably a good thing they tied up David and cut his hair afterwards. Just to remind the people, we are still bad guys. Boo us. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, we had a totally random 3-minute highlight package with some of the worst retro 80s music I've ever heard. Had to have been canned. And then, boy, howdy, we had this 6-man main event, which was just fascinating. So, I'm trying to think now. Have we actually recapped a match yet with all of Gary Hart's crew working together? This may have been the first one. Obviously, we had mentioned a while back that they captured the 6-man tag team championships. But I think this is our first time seeing the one-man gang, Mark Lewin, and Killer Tim Brooks all in a 6-man together on TV. And no, they were not rematching the Von Erichs this week. They were wrestling the babyface team of the Iceman, Scott Casey, and the Great Kabuki. And I will at least be fair. This was a perfectly fine tag match when the one-man gang was working. And when he tagged out to Lewin and or Brooks, it looked like a monkey trying to fuck a football in there, brother. Brooks' offense was okay, but his bumping and selling was unearthly terrible. Mark Lewin, I'm not even sure that guy was registering on this planet. I know his gimmick was that he was an unhinged wild man. God, he looked like shit. His chops were so over-exaggerated, it looked like he had to walk himself through how to actually deliver a hand strike to the head. There was a long bear hug sequence on Kabuki, interspersed with Mark Lewin giving him a stink face in the corner for no discernible reason. We had a lot of stationary nerve holds during the heat. All the stuff you love seeing. And then right before Kabuki had any chance to make a hot tag to the babyfaces, the match broke down and it got thrown out. So they couldn't even give us a hot 2-minute comeback before the end. This was demonstrably bad. this was one of those main events where, as I look at the timeline and realize that there's still like 5 to 7 minutes left of runtime, I'm getting more annoyed and more agitated. I'm like, please, for the love of God, have mercy. And that was before I knew about the bullshit finish. All I know is that they gave us a great close to the show with the return of Bruiser Brody, making the run-in to save all the baby faces. Massive ovation. Massive pop for that return. That was awesome. Not all too sure about the knee-high green shorts. But fuck it. It's Bruiser Brody. He's back. I mean, that at least made up for that abortion of a finish in the main event. I don't know about the longevity of his run this go-around. I mean, he was constantly in and out of Dallas for years. Definitely a good choice to come back and combat Gary Hart's pack of wild animals. And again, it is a massively over babyface that people recognize and actually want to see. No offense to Scott Casey, but the bloom is off the rose with that push. Iceman and Kabuki have charisma. Scott Casey, not at all. So I am all for substituting Brody for Scott Casey if that means getting that guy the hell out of the main event picture. But yeah, dude. Another chapter in the 1985 world-class book. The shows are progressively falling off the map. You know, they still try to keep you hooked and sucked in with surprise returns like Bruiser Brody. Couple little small things to keep you on edge, but so much of the show is just blasé. I mean, I'm going to keep committing to the reviews for the time being, but I mean, don't be surprised if sometime in the next year or two we consider putting the kibosh on these world-class reviews. I mean, I at least think we should make it up through the rebranding. Right before they sold to Jerry Jarrett in 89 and changed to the UW or the USWA. You know, we're still a few years out from that, but at least we would be covering the vast majority of the world-class TV library right before turnover happens, basically. And that way we're actually doing a full retrospective of the ups and downs. We'll see, though, dude. I mean, it's already been rough getting through 1985. And this is still considered a reasonably good year historically. Even though I'd beg to differ having watched the product from a booking standpoint. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. But as we wind up here and round things out, thanks everybody for tuning in to watch. We still have at least one more week before SummerSlam 95. That'll be part of next week's show. So thanks everybody for checking it out and keep posted for the big Monday show next week. And we'll catch you guys on the flip side. As always, I appreciate you guys coming back to check out the show. Subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. YouTube and Rumble. Pick your platform, whichever you prefer. I'm still always going to kind of push Rumble as the forefront. But that'll do for now. Take care, everybody. Peace out.